Today we have a phenomenal guest with us, Namma Kumar.
Hi, Aditi.
Do men get threatened with successful women?
Everybody benefits from a successful woman. We see work that earns you money as labor and work that doesn't earn you money as not labor, which is strange because work that doesn't earn you money is actually more laborious.
Is the amount of money a man brings in, is that related to respect?
As a society come together and decided that men will be respected basis how much money they bring in is also the construct of a patriarchal society. Men decided that. Equity is about giving people access to resources.
Feminism is equality. How do we decode that for the men?
We don't.
Welcome back with Decoding Quirks with Aditi. Today we have a phenomenal guest with us. She has worked 13 years as a creative director, and her bold opinions have really made her well known in society today. She has got freedom at the age of 16, which came with a lot of responsibility. And today we want to know more about this successful woman, Namma Kumar. Hi.
Hi, Aditi. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. This is so exciting.
Very exciting.
Okay. Namma, the one main thing growing up as a 90s kid, as a millennial kid, it was very difficult for me to respect or learn to respect other women.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we were always taught to, respect men, learn how to be in a marriage, train the women to be in a marriage. And then today, in 2024, when we see women respecting women, a girl's girl, where did this transition happen from? How did this transition start? And as a successful woman, what does who benefits from being or having a successful woman in their life?
Okay, so the short answer to that obviously is that everybody benefits from a successful woman. But I think the more important thing to sort of break down here or unpack is what constitutes success, right? Because when we're talking about the sort of gendered idea of how we view men, women, respect dynamics, I think what we forget is that these dynamics are usually dictated also in a patriarchal sense, right? We see success as the father going out to work, earning bread, coming back, being able to take his family on 2 vacations a year. But the mother who's putting, traditionally was putting 3 meals on the table, come hell or high water, she was able to do that every single day, be creative in doing that, rear children, navigate societal norms, not navigate progressiveness in the household whilst also being responsible for holding the household together. We never learn to see that as success, right? Which isn't to say that traditional means are coming back, but now that both genders are are working more often than not, we're still seeing professional success as success and personal ambitions and success sort of take a back seat, right? So to get into how everybody can benefit from a successful woman, I think is to just understand the various kinds of success there are, right? There is professional ambition, which is fantastic to have, obviously, but not at the cost of personal ambition, right? At the cost of one's personal relationships, at the cost of one's relationship with oneself, which I think is the biggest definer of success, is how happy do you feel in solitude? How good do you feel about your life outside of the extraneous circumstances that give it that context of success? So everybody does stand to succeed in various ways, and everybody does stand to benefit from successful women and what they can learn about the nature of success from them.
Absolutely. I feel like there's something that you said that, personal success and professional success. So when a man goes out to earn, there's a sense of achievement there. Like he's gone out, he's done his duty and he's done it really well. But now when a woman goes out to work, she's still asked about how is she taking care of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Is the same question asked to a man? Not really. So have we really grown as society, and maybe does a man get threatened when a woman is able to do a man's job, that's go out and work and take care of the house, and he's just going out to work? So do men get threatened with successful women?
Small men do. And I think that is the biggest measure of people in general, not just men, women, or people of other genders. It is how do you see the success of others? Do you see it as a threat to yourself, or do you see it as inspiration? Which isn't to say that the latter is always easy to do, right? Not all people are born equal, not all people have the same kind of resources available to them. And different people have different capabilities for labor and success, right? Different people have different circumstances. But what we all do have in common is a sort of perspective, is, hey, can I look at the success of this person, whether it is in my own household, or whether it is a woman in my team at work, or whether it is, someone I run into on the road. Can I see this person's success or their approach as a learning experience? What can I take from them? What can I give to them? How can I collaborate with them, right? We often see collaboration as a very sort of active thing, that, hey, you and I come together, we do this conversation, or you and I come together and we work on this project. Whereas collaboration is an ongoing thing. A conversation with a stranger on the road is a collaboration. It can go successfully and it can go very unsuccessfully, depending on your mood, depending on the circumstances, depending on your station in life or how you're feeling that morning, right? So to approach these collaborations in a way that you leave it richer, I leave it richer, we all leave it richer than we came into it, is a matter of perspective. And that perspective usually cannot come from a place of being threatened by it, right? It has to be with an openness, right? What threatening does to you is it closes you up, right? It's sort of, you make yourself small. And what collaboration requires is for you to open yourself up, make yourself bigger, reach into yourself, find all the generosity you can, find all the charitability you can, to ensure you always have that benefit of the doubt to give to people, and to give to their experiences, such that you can come together and have the most positive outcome for everyone involved, versus making it about yourself and saying, they have something, therefore I don't have it. It's not a zero sum game. We're always taught to look at it like that, because that's the way, the sort of corporate capitalist structure wants you to look at things, at upward mobility. But at the end of the day, it is only when two people's labor comes together that you have something fruitful coming out of it, right? Any object you look around you, nothing comes from one person, not a physical object, not a feeling, not an experience. It always requires more than one person. So how can you expand your universe to invite more people in, to invite more experiences in, such that you don't see something positive in someone as a lack in yourself, but as a learning experience, or as an experience, or as an invitation for collaboration, where your skill set and my skill set can come together complementarily to sort of create something that is larger than the sum of its parts.
And talking about just collaborative, is it more that women have this tendency to collaborate because we come from I'm going to take care of the family, I'm going to take care of my siblings, and I'm a responsible person, and if I'm responsible, then you will grow. And is that now moving into men as well?
I hope so. I hope that it is. Of course, I'm fortunate enough to see these kind of people around me. It may not be the case everywhere, but I do believe that because we are moving largely, even though it may not always seem that way, towards a largely more gender equitable society. Not equitable in all ways, of course, but gender, I suppose, is becoming one of those conversations that is finding, a platform here and in many other such conversations. The reason I think women are more propense to collaboration and a sense of community is exactly that. It's a sense of community, right? The reason women have had a sense of community that is more imbued in our social upbringing is because hardship builds community, whether or not we like it, right? Your pain and my pain, when we sort of identify with one another, we're taught to see joy as a very individual experience. Of course, joy is also super collective. When we win a match, you see people out on the road celebrating, dancing, etc. But those are very few and far between. But when you have a problem and I have a problem, you tell me your problem and I'll be like, oh, I've been through something like that myself, right? We relate to one another, we bond with one another, and those bonds go very, very far. And historically, women, as a part of the oral tradition, as a part of, people who sit at home with one another, whether it is the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, or the sister-in-law and the new bride, or whether it is two sisters, right, sitting around having those conversations about how their days are going, how their lives are going, because they did not have resources like these to turn to, right? So they turned to one another. They didn't have sort of even access to a lot of formalized literature, right? Or maybe even literacy to access that. So therefore, we've built communities as support systems, right? And we continue to do that. And obviously also society encourages women to, women supporting women, women loving women, that kind of thing is now extremely acceptable, is extremely accessible to us. So we look at it and we're socialized to think that, hey, if I have a problem, I can reach out to my girlfriends, right? They're always there for me. But men don't necessarily always have that encouraged in their lives, which makes their lives significantly poorer, and in turn also makes the women in their lives encumbered and inundated with their problems. Like, how often do we see men who will only ever save their vulnerability for the women in their lives? Now, that ends up being a lot of emotional labor for those women, right? Just because we do it for our girlfriends doesn't mean we're all sort of just running around with all the answers. The reason we're able to do it for our girlfriends is because they're able to do it for us, right? So it's a give and take, it's a positive, it's a collaboration again. But are men able to collaborate with you like that? Very often I see, and of course this is not always the case, but very often I see that they're only able to tell you, hey, here's how I'm feeling, right? Or here's what I'm thinking. Now you decode this. Now I've given you all the information. You create a solution out of this and you give it back to me. That's not how women are approaching one another socially. So there's a big difference, but I think the expectation remains the same, which is a fallacy.
So it is a little transactional when it comes. Even when I want help from you, I want to be vulnerable with you. It comes from a place of transaction. These are my problems. This is what I'm thinking. You figure it out. You let me know. And it also comes in an SOS situation, right?
When it's already too late.
Exactly. It's already too late. And now I don't know where to start from. And like, women are talking about their feelings from the time that they knew that they had a feeling, not that it got too late.
Absolutely.
It's not an SOS situation. But like, talking about equality, since you mentioned that, I feel like a lot of men are still confused because feminism has the word fem in it. So they think it's about women, but feminism is equality. So how do we decode that for the men?
We don't. Some things you just have to come to yourself, right? I think that very often we've talked about sort of the emotional labor of women, which is, I think, been at the forefront of any conversation we're going to have with regard to, and not just the emotional labor of women, but any marginalized community as well, right? A lot of the onus of education comes back down to those who are suffering, or those who are oppressed, or those who are less than, or made to feel less than. Right? Whereas the burden of knowledge, or the burden of educating oneself, should be largely on the people who lack that education but have the access to that education. Right? If you don't have access to education, it's a whole other story. But breaking down words such as feminism, for example, for men is not on women. On women is to uplift each other, to uplift those who have less than us, those who have less access than us, those who have less privilege than us, whether that is women, whether that is people of different races, sects, minorities, people living with disabilities, all sorts of things. Because I feel like the thing about progress and equity is not built for one demographic or one kind of person, right? If we are all more equal, we are all more equal. Whether you're a woman, whether you're a person of a different race, whether you're a person of a different religion, that's the only way to approach it. That is the way progressives have always approached it, right? But I think that where we get into sort of the identity of it, right, where we only want to uplift our own kind, that is exactly the kind of thinking that puts these places, or puts these sort of inequities in place in the first place, that I will only look out for my own kind. So then therefore it's fair for men to say I will only look out for my own kind. So if women are going to think that the purview of feminism only goes to other women, men are actually some of the hugest beneficiaries of feminism today, because men are able to talk to their friends and say, it's so often now you will see men wearing more pink. Yes, it's not radical, but it's a start. Wearing jewelry, nail paint, and that's all still extremely just sartorial and very superficial. You have men now telling each other, hey man, I love you, to their male friends, which we do all the time, right? You're going to hang up on a woman you've known for 3 months and be like, hey, I love you. And that's just the most normal thing to say. It makes me feel better. It makes you feel better. It makes the world a better place. So if the access to that kind of emotional vulnerability and the practice of emotional vulnerability that feminism brings to men is something to be looked at and something to be nurtured, not to deconstruct the word and saying, oh, it has feminism in it, so it now means that from a patriarchy we go to a matriarchy. If your conversation is at that level, then perhaps some education is required in order for you to get out of that. But the moment you do, men might see that it is more emancipating for them, right? I mean, emancipating does have the word man in it. So, in order to feel like you are part of something bigger and better, one has to move out of these sort of silos of identities that we see ourselves in and see ourselves as a society, and how can I as an individual feed into making sure that my immediate society is one that is more equitable, and what does it mean for me to contribute in a way outside of just me as a woman reaching out to a woman, right? Of course, our first duty is towards the younger, at least I feel this way as an elder sibling to two younger sisters. I always feel like I have to do that first. That is my first duty at home, right? To ensure that there is a more equitable environment for them. However, how do I imbue equity into the way I deal with, for example, people that I don't consider like myself? That is where it starts. When you create a practice out of it, everybody benefits from it.
Everybody does benefit from feminism, men especially do. But it's that change mentality, right? Something's changing, and it's changing by a gender that is not on in a hierarchy. So obviously they're doing it for their benefit, is what is constantly thought about. And I don't think people like change. People don't like change. And if they've been doing this for so many years, and as per them it's working, even though it's not working, it's just about, why should I go through that change, right? Why do I have to make this change when for years we've been the hunters? And it's that point that holds men back about making that change, even as small as like getting married and your wife is allowed to earn or run a business, but she also has to take a year off to get pregnant, and then she also has to take the next year off because the child is too small, and then she also has to take a year off because he's just gone into school. So it all starts to become onto the woman eventually. People are progressive, but then certain things are just women oriented. So how do we deal with that?
I think the easiest way to, or the sort of most important way to do this is to, again, like I said, redefine the idea of labor itself, the definition of labor, right? We see work that earns you money as labor and work that doesn't earn you money as not labor, which is strange because work that doesn't earn you money is actually more laborious, because work that earns you money is just a transaction. You are doing something and you are getting paid for it. Fairly or unfairly, of course, is up for debate, but women raising children are doing it absolutely for free. But if you are to put that same child in childcare, that is extremely expensive because suddenly it's not your child anymore. Men will, sit around with their kids, spend time with them, and call it babysitting. It's your baby. Who are you sitting? So it's suddenly it becomes labor the moment the man is doing it. And again, this is obviously a generalized statement, but the way to sort of change that is, again, to just change the definition of labor in one's mind. Any work done that has any positive outcome, or well, positive outcome, of course, is subjective, but any work done is labor, right? So if we're able to give it the due respect and the due credence that is deserved to it, suddenly we have people realizing that these things take time, they cost resources, right? Making food every day is not an easy task, right? Ask someone who does it for a living, for example, and they will tell you that, oh my God, food is so important and it is such a delicate craft. But the mother that's doing it at home every day, 3 times a day, we're taking it for granted. We're not seeing that as labor. We're seeing it as an entitlement of food on our table. So the moment we sort of unpack that idea of what constitutes labor, we suddenly see that women are doing a lot of heavy lifting that they have absolutely no thanks for, no resources being dispensed to their to them for, and definitely no recognition for, and which I think is the most important of the three, because at the end of the day, we're simple people. We want to be acknowledged. We want to be seen in the world. We want to be acknowledged as people who have value, right? Therefore, you see some women take a lot of pride in their cooking, a lot of pride in the way that they present their home. But when we don't affirm that pride that they feel, we suddenly make them feel like their work doesn't have worth or value. And that is, a slippery slope, because then you're saying that only when you sort of work for someone, create more profit for a corporation, that you still see the same salary. So sure, you can work hard if you want, or you can slack off if you want, but you're making them money, so you have value. But when you're making your own family happy, when you're making your own the people around you, your society, your community happy, suddenly that is devalued, and that doesn't work for anyone.
Yeah. And I think that comes from that transaction of when a man goes out, he brings in money, and money is seen, and it brings a certain value, and it brings a certain expectation of how they're going to live their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think society measures that, right? So I do have a lot of men writing in to me saying that if we don't make the money, if we don't constantly work, however hard it is, like it's taking a toll on their mental health, it's taking a toll on their relationships, they are not respected.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen this constantly where there is a combination of respect and the amount that a man brings into the house. And this is coming from, like, it's generations. Like, everyone in society somehow is like, so how much do you, like, what's your package? At least for like a newbie. So what's the package?
Yeah.
So somewhere it's related. So is the amount of money a man brings in specifically into his family, is that related to respect?
So far, generally, yes. Right? Because that is how we've been learned to navigate. That's how we've been taught to navigate how we respect people. In fact, if you meet someone, for example, at a party for the first time, right, you're going to ask them, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What we're actually trying to do is see where we need to slot them in terms of the amount of respect we have to give them. So someone says, "I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer," yeah, you'll be like, "Oh, cool, very cool." Then you'll ask them, "What kind of law do you practice, or what kind of doctor are you?" And then you'll sort of uh, uh, place them again in the hierarchy in your mind. You'll try to categorize them as to how much respect and how much of my attention should I give to them. Or they might be like, "Oh, I'm a housewife," and suddenly you're like, "Oh, okay, cool, that's an interesting choice, that's a bold choice," right? Or you might say something like that. Whereas to me or to somebody else, that might be the more interesting question, that, "Hey, what choices have led you to that? Do you find that you're a housewife out of choice, or is that something you need to do because you need to be at home for XYZ reasons?" Right? That is a much richer conversation. It tells me much more about you versus who you make your millions for, or who you make your money for, or who you work really hard for. So obviously, the fact that we've, as a society come together and decided that men will be respected basis how much money they bring in is also the construct of a patriarchal society. Men decided that. Women didn't come around and say. The reason women were also taught to value that is because they said, "Hey, you will not be able to go out and make money. So your lifestyle will be dictated by the man in your life, and therefore you must learn to value it." So when women are called, gold diggers for wanting to do stuff like that, all they're trying to do is secure their future and secure their children's future, right? They're not trying to dig for gold for themselves. If we were trying to do that, we'd be doing it very differently, right? And we'd definitely not be struggling for things like equal pay or our right to go out and work. We'd simply just find the richest man in our community and try to endear ourselves to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of them will always bring it back to this arranged marriage thing. So arranged marriages in India has been going on for generations. It's the most respectable kind of marriage where the parents decide if this boy is the right boy for our daughter. And the first question, or the first few questions are, so what do you do? How much money do you bring in? And, is that money secure enough for our daughter to come into this family? Right? So the blame game that continues is that if we ask a man to, hey, chill out, take it easy, we can also make our money. It's okay if you make a little bit less money. It doesn't have to hurt your ego. And then they blame it on, but yes, it will hurt our ego because when we go out for arranged marriages, your father asks us that. But isn't that a man and a man's problem?
It is a man's problem. It's a man's world, so it's a man's problem. Almost everything in it is, so far as we, exist today. Of course, that is changing. It's changing slowly but surely. But at the end of the day, it's also about the way that we, value upward mobility and money itself, right? We're not talking about how prosperous a marriage is. We're not talking about how healthy a dynamic is. We're not even learning the tools to sort of gauge that. If we're lucky enough that we have enough access and if we have enough people in our life who are having those conversations with us, fantastic. But that is a very, very small minority of people, right? At the absolute edges of privilege in that sense. But mostly we are teaching people even to value their lifestyles basis how many vacations they're taking or what brand they're wearing, and not do they wake up with a smile, do they look at their spouse or their children and feel a genuine happiness and warmth, are they able to communicate correctly without the sense of fear, retribution, abandonment, etc., right? So these structures have been put in place by a general patriarchal capitalist society. They need to be addressed as such, and the only way they can be addressed is through community and conversation between that
Yeah.
community, right? And I think that obviously is happening today. It's happening now. It's just about consolidating those conversations and saying that, hey, we've been doing things this way so far, but here's another way of doing it. For example, in our own relationships and our own marriages as progressive women, we have those spaces for that communication, which very often we realize, sometimes I realize, that we are not even exploiting those spaces. They are available to you. But we've been conditioned by our mother's generation and her mother's generation to think that, oh, if this is given to me, I must either learn to be happy with it or I must learn to be resentful for it. I mustn't learn to navigate it via my own interests, via my own comforts, and via my own needs, right? This is doing a disservice to your partner, and this is doing a huge disservice to yourself. And obviously, so it's doing a disservice to your relationship as a whole, right? Because you are holding on to certain resentments that you're only holding on to because you don't know there is a way out. You don't know that there is a conversation to be had because of that conditioning. Now, of course, men, while put in that position of being the provider largely, can also be talked down a little bit and saying, hey, if you're having a bad day, if you're having a bad month, if you're having a bad year, let me step in. I have this way of sort of contributing, let me step in, right? But if we create these sort of barriers for each other, that you are the provider outside of the house, you bring in the money and I take care of the home, what happens when I fall ill? You wouldn't know how to clean the floors, you wouldn't know how to raise the child, you wouldn't know, how to sort of get food started. Or what happens if you take ill, or if you are indisposed for any other reason? I will still have to do all of these things, I just won't have the resources to do it. And then we fall back on your savings and your financial planning, which is also down to you. So what if you're just not very good at it? What if you have a woman who has, in a marriage, or a heterosexual marriage, what if you have a woman who is very good with finances and a man who's a fantastic cook? What do you do then? Just sit around and play against each other's strengths just so you can go with what society has decided for you? Or do you just play to your strengths? And sometimes, for example, it might be that, for example, I don't drive, my partner might be somebody who really enjoys driving. Now, just because I'm a feminist and I want equality, I can't be like, no, you know what, I'm going to drive that car straight into the curb just because I have a point to prove. We play to our strengths, right? So at the end of the day, you have to play to your strengths, but also you have to ensure that everybody has equal access to those strengths being determined within their lifetimes, right? So I should have access to a car to drive it. I should have access to a kitchen to be able to put food on the table. I should have access to job opportunities to be able to be a provider, or an equal provider, or at least an equitable provider, if not an equal one.
So feminism is basically about just having
Access.
access. That's it.
All equity is about giving people access to resources. At the end of the day, what you make of it, right? If I gave you 10 pieces of Lego and me 10 pieces of Lego, we wouldn't make the same thing, right? I might, like, we will work according to our intellect, our interests, and our experiences. So why do we expect any two people who have the same resources to make the same thing of it, right? We all go to school, we all read the same textbooks, we come out with very different knowledge, and we have to create a society that appreciates all those knowledge, all those ways of learning, the pedagogy as well as the outcomes equally, right? Versus saying, oh, you're good at science and maths, you're very smart, and you're good at humanities. I guess that's fine. You could be a teacher. Whereas somebody who's teaching should be at the highest form of respect, right? That is the person that's putting knowledge out into the world. But that's not how we learn to see things. And hopefully that changes.
Absolutely. Do you think that, putting people in these labels and putting people in these boxes, it just makes it easier for the person like learning this knowledge, right? So, the stereotypical, if you're good at maths, uh, if you're good at science, become an engineer. If you're good at maths, like fly a plane or something like that. So, do you think it's just easier? We are putting people into boxes because it's easier for us to remember? And why is it like easier for us to remember in that sense?
Why should it be easy, right? It is one of the more important things to do. So, why are we looking for the easiest way? We don't look for the easiest way when we do things that we ascribe value to. We look for the right way of doing them, right? At work, if I'm constantly looking for the easiest way to do something, chances are it's not going to be the best one. And we understand that there because we again ascribe monetary value to it, or benefit, like immediate benefits value to it. So when something is hard, doesn't make it less worth doing. In fact, it might be more worth doing because building those sort of neural pathways for yourself and building those social pathways for people around you is equally important, right?
Yeah.
So change is hard, but to accept it makes it easier for people that come after you.
And
Right.
it makes it more progressive. And I think even the word progressive is taken really badly in our society today, because I see a lot of men like, shouting about the fact that, oh, this is a westernized culture. This westernized culture will ruin us and this progressiveness will ruin us. Is it a way for them to stay in power? And mostly, I do see this in like toxic work cultures, like with bosses and the boys' club. So, is this a way to stay in power?
Absolutely. See, the divide and rule is something, especially like in our part of the world, we've heard repeatedly, right? It's always easier to get people to fight with each other than to fight the people themselves, right? So when you break people up into smaller factions, whether that is on nationality, race, gender, caste, creed, sexuality, whatever it might be, it's just easier to pit them against each other because by creating a category, you're creating an anti category,
Yeah,
right? You're
yeah.
creating the other. So it's very easy to be like, oh, you fight with you, then I don't have to fight you at all. You fight each other, make each other weak, deplete each other's resources, deplete each other's energies, and then I come in, swoop in, and be like, oh, okay, I've saved the day. So it's very easy to do. The playbook is super simple. This is how power structures have always worked. This is not new. What's new is that we have more information, we have more history, we have more recorded history, but we keep falling for the same thing. We keep pitting man against woman, woman against other woman, man against a man of a different skin color. And then we expect to have better results. And that is, it's not only is it silly, it goes against everything that we value, which is intellect and efficiency. We value that so much, and yet we keep laughing in its face, doing the same things, expecting different results.
It's like if nothing changes, right?
Absolutely.
You need to make some massive change in the way you approach women, in the way you approach women in a working environment, in a corporate job, and then you will see some change. So, talking about, the boys' club, why did it start existing?
Because people are propense to community, right? Anywhere that you find people coming together
Mm.
over things that they have in common. Now, there was a time, of course, where at the highest levels of corporate existence, it was mostly men, right? Where you had women, it was mostly secretaries, people who had to do the typing, just things like that, or people who didn't have to do things that necessarily needed them to think about a career, right? Just about even in Western society, all they had to do is get up until marriage, and then if they were working class, they continued to work. But if they were middle class or upwardly mobile in any way, they wanted to marry, or they were married off and expected to be out of the workforce, right? And being in the workforce was seen as, oh, you need a two-income household, you must not be doing so well, right? That was the general view of it. So obviously, where you had a lot of men, you had them coming together over whiskey and cigars or whatever, however these boys clubs started, right? I don't know, in my mind I have a very sort of madman like idea of like how it all started, but obviously they came together as men because that was the only thing they had in common, right? Or that was the most obvious thing they had in common. what they've done is hold on to that, because we see these things as zero sum games. The
Yeah.
moment you see that, hey, women are coming into the workforce, and I've seen this very often also, women at the highest the highest in the highest offices, corporate wise speaking, um, seem to, or have in the past seemed to, sort of give away some of their femininity or do away with some of their femininity. Wearing the pants, right, is like one of those phrases that gets thrown around quite a bit. Or they might not, like, I know for a fact that, if you're a woman in the workplace who's wearing like red lipstick and a bold eyeliner, suddenly it's like, she really she cares about the way she looks. Why shouldn't she? Men wear suits. That stuff is not comfortable. They care about how they look and come across. But suddenly, when a woman does it, it's seen as frivolous, right? So we don't value it as much. We're not thinking to ourselves, oh, she really cares about this place. She wakes up 15 minutes earlier so she can come here looking like that, inspiring other people to lean
Yeah.
into their femininity or to lean into their identity and continue to do a damn good job of their work, right? We always sort of see it as, oh, she's frivolous, she just cares about the way she looks. We don't extend the same kind of prejudice to men.
Caring about the way you look is firstly the most shallow thing to bring up in a corporate office, in a corporate structure,
Where
because
everything is all about appearances.
exactly, it's everything is it is so shallow, and then you're going to complain about how shallow is shallow, which is really
It's a
ridiculous.
race to the bottom, really.
It's really ridiculous. But what I do see, like, the biggest problem in a corporate structure is that people always, when they hire a woman, they hire them based on how far along in the marriage are they. Are they single? um do they complain a lot, are they very sensitive? Like, they put them to a test to see if they break, and then they hire them, which is ridiculous. So have you faced something, or how does that work in that structure?
Absolutely. I think that, a lot of the times, and there are sort of provisions in place for these things to be discouraged. Employers should not be able to ask you about your
Hmm.
marital status or about, do you plan on falling pregnant or do you plan on having kids, etc. They shouldn't be able to ask you that, legally speaking. But who's going to take these corporates to tasks? We don't have that kind of time. Right? We don't have that kind of privilege that we sit around suing all the people who didn't hire us and then also go out looking for a job, and then everyone is going to be like, oh, she's a difficult woman because she sues people who don't hire her. Now what are you going to do? So people will always tell you that there is legal recourse, but then when you go for that legal recourse, you're a difficult woman. If you don't go for that recourse, you're a timid woman, so you will not thrive in a corporate environment. Now, if you do something, it's seen as negative. If you don't do something, it's seen as equally negative in a completely different way, right? What that does is essentially it's just built to discourage you bringing your femininity to work, which is something I feel very strongly about, because it is our femininity exactly that needs to be brought into the workplace. It is those softer ways that we have been socialized that the workplace needs more of. Being nicer to one another, not necessarily more formal, but being kinder, being more empathetic, being more equitable across hierarchies, because in a corporate structure, far be it from me to say there shouldn't be hierarchies. Those hierarchies exist because that's how work needs to get done. Perhaps someday we will get to a place where it's not that way, but I don't have the solution to it. What I do have the solution to is, how do you include women in places where decisions are made such that, I mean, it goes as simple as what temperature the office should be, right? You will always have women with their like lovely little outfits and then carrying like 3 covers because the office is too cold because a man has decided it should be 17 degrees Celsius and not 23 degrees Celsius, right? And because they have their 3-piece suits, they're all right. They're wearing their wool and tweed and whatever they have to wear. But even, or generally, in general, men have a higher tolerance for cold than women do. Right? So this kind of thing, right? Something as silly and small as that, seemingly silly and small as that, to something as large as, where do you invest? What kind of industries do you invest in? What do you incentivize? Whom do you incentivize? Right? When a woman is put in power, also very often, if a woman is appointed as the CEO, suddenly the headline is, this place appoints woman CEO. You don't do that when it's a man. Of course, I understand that it is because it is an outlying decision, but you have reduced her to her femininity or her sex or her gender, and then you refuse to let her bring it to work. Or when she does, you kind of see it as, oh, she's a difficult woman, or oh, she's that kind of person, oh, she's sort of trying to get more women in. Of course, you will try and
That's
get
the
more women
point.
in. That's the point. You're trying to build community everywhere you go. You're trying to lead by example. For a woman, you need to be unapologetic about the fact that your first sort of port of call is to emancipate and to sort of elevate other women around you. It's the best you can do because you come from a place of empathy and not from a place of diversity and inclusion, right? I'm not doing it because it looks good on paper. I'm doing it because no, I wish someone had done it for me, right? I'm trying to be the elder sister I always needed. So I think if women approach the workplace like that, I think it makes it a lot more fun for them. I know from my personal experience, workplaces where I have more women have been more fun. Every time two women don't get along in the workplace, the first sort of conversation is, oh, these two women are not getting along. But men can fight all day long and it will be, oh, this is healthy conversation. We must sort of go, we must have conflict. Conflict builds very bold decision making. But if two women don't get along, oh my God, then it's a soap opera, right? That's how we've been trained to see these things, and that's why we see them that way. But if we perpetuate them, then it's on us.
And what you said really like resonated about women being difficult. Just because we have two other questions to ask, only because you were not clear enough and you have not included us in those questions, or our opinions are not counted. We have a question, we are curious. Now we're difficult to work with, and then you don't want to hire a difficult woman. And what the hell is a difficult woman?
Every woman is a difficult woman. Every woman who has, like you said, asked an extra question. Every woman who has taken up space. Every woman who has said no. We are all difficult women, and we should strive to be difficult women because only difficult women get anything done. Only difficult people get anything done. Nobody has sat around and said, you know what? Everything is fine. Things are great the way that they are. If we done that, we'd be nowhere. We'd have no industries, we'd have no ambition, we'd have no Wi-Fi, we'd have nothing, we'd have no technology. Difficult people are celebrated. We look at like a Steve Jobs, right? We look at Warren Buffett, and we're like, oh, they're so eccentric and they have so much character and they're so quirky, and Steve Jobs only ever wore black turtlenecks. I mean, sure, do that. Great fashion statement. But what is it really doing other than just announcing to the world that I'm a very particular person? So men are particular and women are difficult if they want things a certain way. Right? Now imagine if you were somebody or if you're a woman who turns up to work in a red sari every day. You'd become the woman in the red sari. The sari would be wearing you, not the other way around. But when Steve Jobs wears a black turtleneck, it's like, oh, look at him. He doesn't want to spend those 10 seconds in the morning thinking about what to wear. So he has optimized his life. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So what we value and how we value it, the lenses we see it through, the biases we have, color everything. The moment we make ourselves aware of these biases, the world becomes a more lovely place to live in because we can access it from a place of empathy and see things for what they are versus how the narrative that is being fed to us. It is genuinely freeing, and I hope that more people can do it.
And honestly, I think that this is the only way forward. But one thing that does bring us back in this entire equation is the people pleasing attitude that's there in like women growing up, right? You are been born to get married. You have been trained from the 5th grade to like bring your rotis up and learn how to serve a man, learn how to talk to a man, learn how to be with other women or take care of children. So we are, agree or not agree, we have been born to be the good girl and to like please people around. So that conflict is not something that women are like, nobody is giving us like an extra point for like doing both these things together. I'm being difficult also, but I'm also people pleasing at the same time. I'm also going back home and seeing how I have to take care of my children or how I have to take care of my husband. And but men have one role, right? So how do we define these multiple hats that women have or need, but like men have one hat, like they wear the same provider hat in the office and at home? How do we like show people that or tell them about this?
So I think the interesting thing here also is that, like you said, we've been socialized as women from a very early age to cater to people around us, and not just to our own whims and fancies and to what is immediately before us or to hierarchy,
Hmm.
right? Like boys are also told to sort of respect your elders, which is something women are also told, because that hierarchy is going to, like, respect for hierarchy is going to serve them later in life, right? Um, so it's not like we're not telling our boys how to be and how not to be. We're telling them to not cry. We're telling them to be strong. We're telling them to, maybe not disrespect your elders. We're telling them to be on time. We're telling them to be neat and tidy. We are teaching them things. It's just the pedagogy and the syllabus is very different for girls and boys. Girls are doing all of it, and boys are doing one part of it, right? Generally. Now, the problem is not that, oh, women are doing this and men are doing it differently. I think the solution to any of this is that everything that women are taught, men should also be taught. Whatever you're teaching your girl, teach your boy. So if you're teaching your girl to be safe, if you're teaching your girl to be on time, if you're teaching her to be tidy, if you're teaching her to boil water, teach that to your boy. The world will benefit from more people
Yeah.
having more skills, specifically life skills, right? Men, by and large, are learning more and more to keep house these days, which only benefits them,
Hmm.
right? So, um, things like that, I think we need to make equitable, not by saying, oh, don't teach it to your boys, don't teach it to your girls, but teach everybody,
Yeah.
inculcate it in everybody, and see what takes.
So there's this one list that I found on, I think, Meta AI or something like that, which showed like what are the rules, not rules, like what should a woman have or what should a man have, like this typical. And the women were like, take care of your family, learn to like respect elders. For like men, it was like on the eighth or ninth point of like respect a woman,
Mm-hmm.
like learn how to like be fair, be kind. These were like the last points of the list, which is like what we need today. Like this is the basic. So at some point we do realize that sometimes men don't have that basic knowledge because they have been told to like parampara and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So they haven't learned. So what very well, like you said, what we learn as our basic is what they learn like as an extracurricular activity.
Absolutely.
It's not equal. Just the learning is not being equal. But coming to today's day and age, Nima, we have something known as conscious parenting, and people are trying to like, teach their sons things from the angle of, oh, I'm going to teach him how to cook. So now his wife will have like a better time and not go through what I went through. Right. So it is coming. And I hope this change is acceptable and men are not shaming other men for like, or men are not shaming their sons for like, picking up a Barbie or like learning how to, cook in the kitchen. And I hope it does like get into a better headspace, especially for men, because I think they need it too.
Yeah. I think one way to approach this positively is, when you like something, you are more likely to be good at it. And
Hmm.
if you are good at it, you will do it more efficiently. So, to put this in male terms, in the way that men understand, is when you let people play to their strengths, everybody wins. So, if a boy is an excellent ballerina, and if that's what brings him joy, if that's what puts food on his table, if that's what makes him happy, if that's what brings him out of bed every morning, society stands to benefit. If a woman is a, I don't know what is the most, an MMA fighter, okay? If throwing a punch is what makes her happy, if where putting on makeup is not her thing, if wearing high heels is not her thing, and if that brings her out of bed every day, then society stands to benefit from having better MMA fighters who want to be there and who didn't just sort of like stumble in or whatever. Of course, these are just like
Yeah.
larger categories I'm using, but people playing to their strengths brings more joy into the world, because people approach what they're doing with more joy when they do it as an active opt-in versus an opt-out. There are lots of people who just stumble into engineering because their parents said IIT jao, then do engineering, then you do whatever you want with your life, right? And what are they doing with their life after they've spent all the 6-10 years doing education at the best of institutes? You think they're going to be like, actually, I think I'm going to be a sous chef. It's not going to happen. That requires its own training. Just because you see it happen or just because it's not valued the same way doesn't make it an easy job. You don't just stumble into it. It requires, if anything, more practice and training, right? So we need to tell our kids much earlier on to follow what brings them joy, what can continually bring them joy. We need to be more conscious in the way that we sort of also give them access to, like, for example, personally, I have started doing this every time, like now, we're at the age where our friends are having children. Every time it's a boy, kitchen set. I'm like, no, man, if your parents are not going to do it, hopefully they are. Most of my friends are, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be that aunt, right? If it's a girl, Hot Wheels.
Yeah.
Because, like,
Why not?
someone has to do it,
Yeah.
right? And chances are, I'm not repeating a gift you've already gotten. So
100%.
just diversify the kind of things you open your child's mind up to. They will grow up to be more open-minded individuals. We already have our prerequisite privilege, etc., of being able to do most things that we want. Yes, tomorrow if I wake up at the age of 33 and say, actually, I'd like to be an astronaut, that's not going to happen. But tomorrow, if I want to change in career, at least I have access to the facilities within my life to be able to pursue them. Because I have some knowledge of the fact that this can be done.
Is like changing careers, been someone who has changed her career. Changing careers was always taken and looked at from a place of a failure point of view, back in the days. Like, oh, your business didn't work out and thus you needed to change your career. So it was looked at as a sense of shame.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as millennials, we have completely changed that, the way we view it. So someone who has changed a career, I'm just like, oh, I have grown so much. I have been able to get that knowledge and grow so much so that I could change my career. And by growing so much means getting information, learning what other people like, changing into a whole new field. So what do you think about changing careers?
It is the best thing I ever did for myself, obviously. But in general, as a sort of theme, what I think about it is that I'm very grateful for the privilege to be able to do that. Not everybody can. Not everybody goes into a career consciously. Like I said, some people are just like, this is what I studied, now this is what I will do, right? But in my case, for example, I was doing something I loved and now I'm doing something else that I love. And what that makes possible for me personally is it makes my life richer because now I have two kinds of experiences, right? We're always richer for these kind of experiences, for this kind of exposure. But when we look at a career, we sort of only see an upward trajectory because we're like, oh, you got here and then you opted out and started from scratch elsewhere. But there's no starting from scratch. In life, there is no starting from scratch. Whatever you do, you take that knowledge and apply it to something else. So yes, you may not be monetarily where you were, when you quit your previous career. But in terms of experiences, you are exponentially richer. So again, it comes right back to what we were talking about. The things you value are what need to change, not the value of those things itself. Right? Those things have intrinsic value. Career changes have intrinsic value. Making that choice is so empowering. That has intrinsic value. For someone like me who has gone from being somebody who was employed for 13 years to being self-employed, that agency has value. Putting that kind of faith in myself has so much value, right? So if I'm able to value those things, I will wake up every day with a skip in my step, which I do now, which is lovely to have. And I wish more people open their hearts and their lives up to these opportunities.
I truly believe like changing your career is you managing burnout. So when you change your career is because either you have already experienced everything you needed to experience from that career, you got all the knowledge, all the skill or everything. And maybe you're like, okay, now I can't go upwards from here. And if you continuously try to go upwards at a plateau is when burnout happens, right? So people change careers to avoid burnout. They are the smart ones, versus the other ones like, I'll take a break, I'll come back to it. Hopefully I'll get 1% better like every 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ones constantly in a burnout.
Absolutely.
So I think like changing careers is the secret to like dude, stop this burnout,
Yeah.
man. It's getting too much.
Absolutely. I think anything that is an opt in versus an opt out, right? Anything that is an active decision made with one's own circumstances in mind can only be a positive thing. It may not always feel like that. Whether it is leaving a job, whether it is leaving a partnership, a marriage, a friendship, moving houses, whatever it may be, any kind of change that you invite into your life is you essentially gracefully going into the next phase of your life versus your life pushing you into the next phase.
Yeah.
So I think we need to encourage that. I think specifically as women, because we're also like taught to sort of be like, oh, if nothing is broken, don't fix it. Don't try to fix it. You might make it worse. Everything is fine. Just stay on this track. Like recently, I had somebody tell me, oh, we heard you lost your job. And I was like, no, I quit my job. They're like, quit your job? Why would you do that? You were in such a good position. And I said, because I wanted to start my own thing. They said, oh, so you quit a paying job for a job that doesn't pay you yet? And that was very hard for them to fathom. And I understand the confusion. I get it. It is a lot of privilege to exercise and say, hey, okay, 3 or 4 months, we may not be making some money, but we'll be making some memories. Um, but I think it's a hard thing to wrap one's head around. But if you have that privilege, then exercise it, do it. And if it doesn't work out, man, go back to whatever you already have that corpus of information, intelligence, intellect. That muscle can be flexed whenever you want it if you just keep flexing it every now and then. But to make a choice for oneself, I think is more empowering than anything a job can give you.
Yeah, because see, skills are always there. You can always go back to it. And going back to something is not a failure move. Like for me, when I went from Bombay to Dubai, Dubai to Bombay, there was that thought of, would this be like, going back a failure move? But at some point, I was just like, I just went to see what's out there.
Yeah.
I learned so much more and I've come back. So actually, I've grown as a person versus someone who has just decided to stay in their comfort zone and not like ventured outside. So even like changing careers helps burnout, and coming back to a career, it just means that you've grown so much more. You've learned to like respect something more, value something more. You're bringing more when you come inside. Um, there's something that you kept bringing up, which was community and, a support system. And what is it now, like as 30-year-olds? What is community? What do we consider as community? Especially, women who come from Mumbai and the heart of Mumbai, which is Bandra. What is the sense of community that we're talking about, that we hear so much, like this word being thrown around all the time?
So I think the whole idea of community, especially the way that we these days are approaching it, right? Earlier, it used to be about, when you didn't have as much connectedness, it was about finding people that live close to you, your relatives, people that sort of are in and around your everyday, whether that is from work or where you live or so on and so forth. Today, I think community has become more about finding like minded people, people who share the same end goal, people who enjoy the same things or maybe deeply don't enjoy the same things. You can come together as strongly on hatred as you do on love. In fact, sometimes more strongly, as we have learned. But so these communities are everywhere, right? Subculture is everywhere. Finding it, I think, requires some amount of work. But it's becoming more and more easy, like you said, in a city like Mumbai, where we, especially like living in Bandra as I do, and I was born and raised there and have very strong feelings about that, obviously, because it's just a lovely, lovely place that gives you a little bit of the old, a little bit of the new. It gives you your gentrified cafes and your yoga classes, but it also gives you walking around, seeing the same tree that I have for the past 33 years. I have walked past that tree. My cold storage guy is the same. He is part of my community. The person I get my bread from is the same uncle. He is part of my community, right? So I'm able to access both. I'm able to go online and find people who live 3,000 miles away from me because we love the same band. They are my community. But, the man who slices my bread for me is part of my community. The moment I add myself, the moment I make myself accessible to more communities, and the moment I make more communities accessible to me, I am making my life richer. Because every community is someone you can lean on for something. You get something out of them, sure, but they get something out of you too, because communities can only be formed when people actively participate in them, right? So whether it is your physical communities or your online communities or any kind, or your, interest based or identity based communities, women stand to always benefit from each other's emancipation and elevation. Same way, if I keep my community clean, if I keep my building clean, if I keep my area clean, everybody stands to benefit from it. If I ensure that things are done in a more equitable fashion where I live, if I ensure there is less hatred, anger, traffic violations, so on and so forth where I live, and more people do that for their own communities, you have a better city, you have a better state, you have a better nation, you have a better world. And that internationalism is the only way to approach this. It's the only way that works. Because, like I said, if you are only looking for your own kind, and if you're only looking at your own kind to be, to reach a better station in life, that's it. You've made yourself the other. You've suddenly closed yourself off. You're in the bubble. Everybody else is not in the bubble. You've put yourself in the bubble, right? So the moment you have a more internationalism view of these things, that hey, a better home, a better area, a better city, a better state, a better country, a better earth,
Yeah.
better universe,
Yeah.
right? That is something that can put joy in your heart. It's something that will make you wake up every day, feel not alone, which is the easiest trap to fall into when you're trying to do something good, when you're trying to live life the right way. Is often it can feel like a lonely place, but community is something that saves you from that. You see that in someone else, that hey, I care about this, you care about this, come, let's care about it together. And whatever we do will always be larger than the sum of its parts, because that collaboration, that little magic that you add on top of it, which is collective joy, that is what makes all the difference.
That's so beautiful. I mean, we do know that community is something that will help us grow. How often do we tap into these communities to actually help us during our bad times and our worst times?
So, not often enough, I think, because very often, we see tapping into community as asking something. But now look at yourself, or, take anybody else, each individual, take your own example and ask yourself how wonderful it feels when someone asks you for help, right? When someone asks you for help, you feel useful. You feel like you're a real person, like you have value in this world. When someone comes to me for advice, I will always feel like, oh, so you think I have good advice to give you, right? Making people feel useful, letting people feel useful is super, super important for them as much as it is for you. And it's not a, transactional thing that today I ask you for help and you give me help and now I have one and now I leave the room and that's it. We will never interact again, right? Oh, fine, that could happen. Of course, there are the edge cases. But tomorrow it opens you up to come to me, right? I have normalized us reaching out to one another, right? That is how any friendship begins. That is how any good relationship begins. That is also how good collaboration at work happens, is when two people feel comfortable coming to one another, right? Or you feel comfortable tapping into a community. And at the end of the day, I think we have to realize is that, capitalist structures and also a certain kind of patriarchy wants to gatekeep knowledge, wants to gatekeep comfort, wants to gatekeep joy. What other ways of living teach you is that the more you share, the more everyone has, right? These things compound on themselves, whether it is joy, whether it is comfort, whether it is ease, whether it is information, right? So if we reach out to one another, we are in a way, even if we are serving ourselves in that moment, we are serving the larger narrative, we are serving the larger normalization of community and of socialization, and that works for everyone.
And just helping each other. So no one's weak and no one's strong, and that the whole narrative completely like goes away that I'm strong, you're weak.
Mhm.
People people find it easier to go online and write their question on Google or YouTube and listen to a 15-minute documentary on, how do I deal with my cheating ex-boyfriend or whatever, rather than asking someone who's gone through the same issue. Like, go out there and speak to another woman, but somewhere it does make us seem a little bit weak, right? So it's about changing that narrative, because if you do it, then you're opening up and making it like normalizing it for the other woman to do it as well, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's so beautiful, and I wish I could just go on talking, but thank you so much, Nama. You've given us so much insight. Um, I really appreciate you taking this time out and talking to us about especially how women feel and what women go through. This was so informative.
Thank
And
you,
I
Aditi. I
hope-
really enjoyed talking to you as well.
I hope our audience enjoys it as well.
Thank
Thank you. All right.